Our topic for today is forgiving and forgetting. Forgiving and forgetting. Now, the first marriage that we find in the Bible is with Adam and Eve. These are two perfect people in the eyes of God. They were totally comfortable with each other. They had nothing to hide. They had no shame in their nakedness because of sin. They had not yet separated themselves from God. They hadn't separated themselves from each other. Shame comes only after they have chosen to disobey God. And as a result of their disobedience, they were no longer one with God or one with each other. They went from having a perfect marriage to having a marriage that is common to all the rest of us once that marriage became influenced by sin. All of a sudden, they begin to feel extremely isolated from each other. They tried hiding from God's holiness. They tried hiding from their own hearts, and they were hiding from the hearts of their mate. And God has been trying to draw creation back to himself ever since. And God has been trying to drive husbands and wives back to each other ever since. God wanted them to experience oneness in their marriage. Now, I think it's very important that we realize that sin entered into the human race in the midst of the marriage relationship. That lets us know that it's possible for a lot of things to go wrong in marriage. It doesn't mean something is wrong with marriage. It means there is something wrong with the people that are inside the marriage. We all need help in becoming what God wants us to be. So we just need to realize that because things are not going the way we had intended them to go in our marriage, it does not mean something is wrong with our marriage. It simply means that we need some help. Because right from the beginning, if you look in Genesis chapter 3, verse 12, you'll find that when God wanted to hold Adam and Eve accountable for the problems in their marriage, Adam blamed his bride for his own decision. And men, for the most part, we still play the blame game today. But let me share one of the rules of marriage. That is, two sinners live there. So let's get out of our mind that there's this perfect woman out there for us. And if we just ran into this perfect woman, everything would be all right. No, if we found a perfect woman, we would very quickly mess her up because we ourselves are imperfect. So there are two people, imperfect people, living in the marriage, which means a perfect marriage is not possible. And not only that, the marital mess that Adam and Eve created, it kept going on into their children, Cain and Abel. Genesis 4:5 says, Cain became very angry and his face was downcast. And God gave Cain some grace, wrapping up a warning in verse 7. He says, now Cain, if you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do what is wrong, then know that sin is crouching at your door. And its desire is to have you, but you must master it. You know what Cain did? Cain caved into the sin that was crouching at his door, and he went and he killed his brother Abel. And ever since then, anger and wrath has been rising up between people, especially in the marriage relationship. Now let me ask you this, men. When something happens and anger or conflict arises in your marriage, do you look for healing or do you look for ways to jab at your wife or to become cynical toward her with your words? Let me ask you this. Are you grumpy or are you filled with grace toward each other in your relationship? I'd love to be able to tell you that I'm always filled with grace, but the reality is sometimes I'm just plain grumpy and just difficult for my wife to get along with. So when instead of me blaming her for it, I need to look at myself, need to take a gut check and ask myself, what are you doing wrong? Let me ask you this. Do you and your spouse have a lot of sarcastic skirmishes, or are you already at the place where you are at all-out war? When you fight, are you able to forgive each other? Or do you let things just kind of simmer and fester there for a long time to come? Now, Ingrid Trowbridge said this, there is only one thing harder than living alone, and that is to live with another person. I want you to get that. The one thing that's harder than living alone is to live with another person. It's hard living with another person even when the other person is a wonderful person. Why? Because basically we are all pretty selfish. You see, God can give us a wonderful person, and simply because we want things to go our way, we will convince ourselves that this wonderful person is the wrong person for me. So we're looking for a new wonderful person when God has already given us a wonderful person, but because we're not willing to change our own selfish nature, we completely miss what God is trying to do. Rarely, and I do mean rarely, rarely do we consider we are the wrong person for the other person, and what we need to do is to make ourselves into the right person for our mate instead of seeking to simply change mates. Yes, you are the right person for your wife. What you might need to do is to make some adjustments, just like I find myself continually needing to make some adjustments so that I can become. Hi, if this broadcast has been a blessing to you and you would like to listen to the message in its entirety, please go to our website at www.glenvillenewlife.com and you can choose the sermon that you would like to listen to and view it in its entirety, and it will be in a much clearer format. That's www.glenvillenewlife.com.